We are live. Cool. We are live. What is up, everybody? How is it going? Austin Prechtelevate Performance, coming at you live today with a badass person that I have had the I guess like glory of getting to know and getting to work together as not only a client coach basis, but now on a coach basis, I guess, because now you're on the team. This is Erin, and yeah, if you guys don't know her, I'm gonna let her take a sec to kind of introduce herself. Tell us about yourself, Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin. I've been a stay-at-home mom to 3 kids. And I was doing some in-person fitness coaching before the pandemic, and pandemic hit, and that went out the window, and health issues came up, and
Yep.
then Austin was helping out a friend of mine, and that's how I kind of got introduced to him. And
That's pretty cool. Everything's kind of
yeah,
connected in that way. I want to emphasize like it is really cool because like I feel like almost everybody that I'm working with now on like a regular basis or that I know or that are like in my network, it all kind of started from like just like getting to know like one or two people, and like through getting to know those one or two people, like through word of mouth, like our networks and our like friend groups and like social media like environments just kind of started overlapping. And so I think that that's like such a cool like thing that like if social media didn't exist, like social media's
20
got its
years ago, that
yeah.
wouldn't happened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
social media's got its good stuff and its bad stuff, but I
Right.
definitely think that that's one of like the real positives of it is just that like connectivity and like that community like that you can like form online with other people. And so yeah, but Erin, you are like I said at the very beginning of this, you're a badass, and I want to tell people why you're a badass. And you recently did a post about it, actually, talking about and kind of like celebrating like you hit a big milestone recently. Do you want to like share what that was?
Yeah, I'm 50 pounds down, which is
Hell yeah.
awesome.
Hell yeah, you are. Hell yeah, you are. Say it louder. Let's hear
Woo,
it.
50 pounds down.
Hell yeah. No, it's crazy though. Like that's a huge accomplishment. And not only like is that like that's a huge accomplishment for anybody, but let alone in like kind of like not only the timeline that you were able to do it in and accomplish it in, but also just like how like sustainably you did it too. It's not like you went like the crazy like burnout route, like 50 pounds down crash diet kind of thing that people sometimes try to do, which isn't sustainable long term. And
Right.
then it's one of those things where like you just did it in a and that's not a short period of time. That's like what it's been like 6 months, 7 months now that we've been working
Yeah.
together. But like but it's one of those things where it's like that's like really freaking like good progress like in a short quote unquote period of time. But it's because you were just like, and like I said earlier, you didn't crash diet or anything like that. You just like were consistent as fuck during your journey. And so which is crazy, and it's something that I think that's like super impressive. And I think that a lot of times um people, whenever they come into their journeys, they have I would say a lot of times, like 9 times out of 10, people have unrealistic expectations when it comes to like what they hope to achieve in a certain like period of time. And I think that for you, like for those that are out there thinking about starting their own journey, you've always like had like a pretty like realistic like level headedness about your own goal and your own journey. And I think that that's something that's really helped you like be as successful as you are in your journey. And so like for you, when it comes to your journey and maybe in terms of like advice to other parents or moms or those that are wanting to even anybody in general who wants to start like a weight loss journey, what would you say are some things that you feel like really benefited you and your situation from the beginning that somebody who's new to this should maybe try to focus on the most? Like what's like the best thing that you think that you did for yourself early on?
I just focused on that small step first. Like I
Yeah.
didn't I didn't think 6 months ago that I was going to be down 50 pounds.
Yeah.
Honestly, like
Yeah.
I did not.
That's so cool.
Um, so I focused on like that first step. And for me, that first step was getting support.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
needed to take that step to reach out and get help
Mhm.
instead of staying stuck and
Yeah.
frustrated where I was.
Mm.
And just, that step was
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
And then learning about the workouts that work with my body and
Mm.
not like hurting myself,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah,
um
and at the beginning too, because you had just recovered from or were in the process of recovering still even a little bit, like with like with a lot of
with
like
my
back
back.
pain because you're having
Yeah,
like
yeah. I have degenerative disc
yeah,
disorder, and that's never gonna go away no
no,
matter what.
yeah,
Once that starts, it just is.
yeah,
But doing the strength training workouts and building up, like
yeah,
I didn't start with super heavy weights. I
no,
started, I think I was doing like 2 pounds.
yeah. It was
Like I
very,
started
very, very
super,
lightweight from the beginning. I
super,
remember.
super lightweight. Yeah. And just kind of built up all the rest of my muscles. And now, like I helped my friend move and
Yeah,
never, like I still haven't been back to the chiropractor
that's freaking
since
awesome.
before that
That
point.
is so, that is so awesome. That's crazy, and it's one of those things too. It's like a lot of times, people like, and I'm sure maybe you kind of went through this, and I mean, I can resonate and empathize big time on a level when it comes to like kind of like dealing with like a chronic injury that like happens. Is it can be pretty frustrating, and it can be kind of like demoralizing at times when it's like, oh, like I just want to get back to where I was, or I just want to like feel like myself again, or do the things that I used to enjoy. Because like when I tore my pec, like I mean, I love lifting weights, I love bodybuilding. And we had like a baby at the time and everything like that. And it was just like a lot of things when you're injured, it can feel not like I don't want to be overly dramatic, like a death sentence or whatever, but it can feel like it's like almost like your some of your goals might feel like they're dying a little bit or whatever. And so for you, like because I know there's a lot of people out there who are injured, and I want to preface like this isn't like medical advice. We're not doctors or anything like that, but like depending on the injury, like there's definitely some things that can be done to work around it and to try to not give up on your goals. And so for you with your injury that you had, like what was that like kind of like the process of getting back into it, I guess, for yourself? Like was it just like kind of like start like taking it step by step, kind of baby steps, kind of like what you're
It
talking about?
was. Yeah, it was just baby steps, meeting myself where I was, not where
Mm,
I wanted to be, but
mm,
right where I was in the moment and realizing, and then also getting over those mental blocks,
mm,
like not having an I can't mentality, but
mm,
I
mm.
can't right now
Ooh,
or I can't yet
that's
because
that's powerful. That's super smart. And that's something that I actually I don't know who I was talking to about it the other day, but I watched a video and it was talking about like uh you have to be careful with like I am statements or I can't, like any like I statements. Basically, it's like those are powerful because those are the things that end up becoming the thoughts that like circulate in your head on a regular basis. And so if you're telling yourself like I can't get in shape, or I can't ever I won't ever be where I was again, like I mean you're probably not going to get to that point because that's all you're telling yourself. And so working through that, like that mental, like almost like it's like a dance at times. It's like trying to
Mhm.
like swap out the thoughts from that, what I like to call like my little inner bitch voice or whatever. Because that because when you're in pain and when you're struggling and whenever you're like down on yourself, like it's really easy to like continue to stay down on yourself about things. And so like it's almost like you have to like claw your way back to getting to a positive headspace again. And being injured doesn't make it any easier. So yeah, and I
Right.
think I think that's awesome. And I mean, here we are. Like you said, you just finished up like a crazy like week-long bike ride, didn't you?
I
Like,
did. I
yeah,
did. COVID set me back.
yeah,
I'm not gonna lie.
yeah.
But I'm still proud of myself that I was able to ride the
Oh yeah.
100 miles that I rode.
Yeah, that's pretty
So
insane. I can honestly say I've never ridden 100 miles on a bike at any given point. Probably, I rode the most I've ever done was like 15 or 20, and like I remember like that's another story for a different time. But like this is a funny side note. Like my seat was made out of a block of wood, and so
Oh,
it
no.
was not my bike. But we so yeah. But anyways, that was not a fun time trying to sit down for the rest of the week after that. But anyways,
No,
yeah.
no.
So, um, so that being said, so like for right now, like from where you because you said something earlier that I wanted to kind of touch on, like meeting yourself where you're at right now, because I feel like that's something that a lot of people struggle with early on in their journey, or even coming into their journey, is that they have all these aspirations, they have all these goals and these things that they want to achieve, and they're like, they're not there yet though, right? Like they get into the journey, and it's that almost like, I want it kind of like instant gratification. Or it's like, I want it now. Or it's like, why am I not further along than where I am right now? And kind of, I think that that's such an important thing for people to kind of realize coming into a journey, is that you got to meet yourself where you're at right now, and you have to be like honest with yourself. And it doesn't mean that you can't like strive to be that
Right.
next level. But I think it's important to like be like, hey, like, and I think that's one of the nice things about what we do here, is that we meet people where they're at. We're not like going to throw somebody into like a crazy boot camp style workout where they they haven't strength trained or maybe ever before in their life, and it's like all of a sudden it's like, okay,
Go do 60 pounds of no,
yeah,
no.
no, yeah,
That's
you're gonna
not,
get hurt
that's
or hate
not,
your life,
yeah,
and yeah, and so it's
yeah,
like, wanting to have like because at the end of the day, we're doing this. We're A lot of times people like think that working out or like a fitness journey is like punishing themselves, or it's like this like negative thing that they have to do. But if you come at it from the approach of like, this, I'm doing this for myself because like I love myself, or like fitness should be fun at the end of the day. And I think
right.
that like I think setting yourself up for as much success when it comes to that, by not throwing yourself through like a gauntlet of like crazy workouts from the very beginning, and like meeting yourself at your like true level of fitness, and maybe having somebody help you figure out where that is, it can be very helpful to having like a smooth transition into your journey. And so, yeah. So for you, like, what would you say was like, the biggest shift for you that kind of like led to your like current level of success?
Um, I feel like it was just feeling tired of hurting,
Yeah.
and I really enjoy going places with my kids,
Mm,
and when I don't have the energy and I'm worried about hurting myself and worried about more pain, it's hard for me to even just go to the zoo and enjoy
mm,
that time with my kids
mm,
if I'm just thinking, okay, I've got this many hours before I have to take my ibuprofen, and I
mm.
got to make sure, or, whatever painkillers, and
Yeah.
um, got to make sure that I have food to eat with that so that I don't end up with an ulcer and then have,
Yeah.
more health problems on top of
Mm.
more health problems. And that was like the big catalyst, was I knew I needed to take the steps to
Yeah.
this change,
Because you're
not
just,
only for me and how I felt about myself, but because I have kids too.
yeah.
And
Absolutely. And we want to be here for like a good time and a long time. And
yep,
especially when both of those things are like, it's like quality of life. Like, and I think that's something that a lot of people kind of like struggle to like kind of see, is like, you know, you're not, it's not what you're like doing right now. Like a lot of people can, live like a decent and good life, like, being unhealthy in the moment, but it's not in the moment that's like the problem. A lot of times it's what's going to follow 5, 10, 15 years from now, when you're paying out the ass for all these like medical bills and all these like potential surgeries and medications and things like that, that like you could have potentially otherwise avoided if you would have got ahead of it, kind of deal. And also just like kind of touching on what you said, like, I mean, I'm a dad and you're a mom, and it's one of those things where it's like I want to be like, I don't want to just spend time with my kid. I want to spend quality time with my kid.
right,
I don't want
right,
to be like in pain the whole time, and like feel like incapable of like, giving them the like taking that away from them. Like, I feel like I had and I'm really grateful. Like my parents were pretty active with me, and my dad especially was like really active with me throughout my childhood. And I feel like that really like set the tone and really set me up to appreciate, athletics or fitness or exercise on like a deeper level. Cause I was like, oh, like my dad was able to go out and play with me all the time and take me to go do sports and take me to go and go hiking out in the woods and stuff like that. It's like, I know a lot of people didn't have that childhood experience. And it's like, I feel like as a dad, I'm like, if I don't provide that on some level to my kid, like, or even like a better version of that, like I'm like robbing him of some like, quality, like childhood memories or something like that. And it's like, I don't want to have those regrets or those what ifs. And so like, what do you feel kind of like the same way about that in some
Yeah,
ways?
I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
I grew up, we would go camping and hiking and fishing and hunting, and we were constantly going and doing things, and I want my kids to have the same kind of childhood where, hey, we've got this weekend, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Yeah.
And
And if you're in like pain or if you're like
yeah,
unhealthy, or
you
if you're
can't
like,
focus on having fun. You can't just enjoy the moment because you're
yeah.
constantly worried and constantly.
Yeah. I think that's something that a lot of like, because a lot of times parent like, and I get it. I completely get it. And I know where parents come from whenever they're, you know, when they feel this way or think this way, where they're like, I don't have time for a journey, or I don't have time to make this a priority. I want to spend time with my kids, or I feel like if I spend that time on myself instead of with them, like there's that like parental guilt of like not spending time with them. But it's like, I would rather spend like, and it's one of those things too, you get better and more efficient at it as you work at it. So you save more time too, the more you do it. But it's one of those things where it's like, I would rather, work on myself a little bit and get myself to a healthy, happier place. So that way I can be a healthier, happier parent and spend, a higher level of like quality time rather than quantity time with my kid, anyways. And so, yeah. So for you, like, what would, because you're a stay-at-home parent, and so like and you homeschool your kids, right? And so,
Basically.
yeah. And so, being in that like environment as like a parent, because like, I was stay-at-home parent for like six to 12 months for like a baby, but like, and you've got 3 kids. And so like, what would you say is like a common struggle, like as a stay-at-home parent, on a fitness journey that like you maybe dealt with at the beginning, but you got better at as you went along? Or what do you think is something that like really helped you kind of like make you a priority whenever there's there's a lot of kids around and do it, and that's just, one of those things.
Right. So I think one of the biggest struggles is, I'm not sure if it's time or energy, because they're kind of combined.
They are.
You spend all of your time and
Yeah.
all of your energy on your kids,
Mhm.
and then getting over like that mental hurdle that you are also worth time and energy,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
putting a little bit of time and energy into yourself is
Mm.
actually going to give you more time and
Mm.
energy for the kids, and
That's
it's going to
so
be more like enjoyable
yeah.
quality time versus just
Mm.
quantity.
That's so true. And it like compounds too, almost. It's like
Yes.
every time you spend a little bit more time on yourself, you're basically like compounding that over time for them also in the future. And it's like, yeah, maybe it's a little bit of time spent in the now for that they don't get, but it's for you. And because you were able to do that, like, you were able to have more energy with them later in the day or in the weeks ahead, or, maybe, for some people it could very well, like, this is just not scare tactics or anything like that, but this is just the fact of the matter is, like, you could be adding 5, 10, 20 years to your life by practicing healthy habits and exercising and eating right to some degree, like, that can
Mhm.
add literal years to your life that somebody might not get because of their health issues or something like that. and
Right.
so and so it's like, it's not all about like in the now. It's also about like, in the future too, to make sure that you can, so you yourself can have a good life, but also so that you can, provide, like, I know a lot of people right now, they're like, I want to be able to play with my grandkids whenever my kids have kids. And it's just like, yeah, like I want that too. I'm going to be I'm going to be a fun freaking grandpa. It's going to be awesome.
Right.
If my kid has kids, I'm going to be, and so, yeah.
Even if he just has dogs,
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'll be able to play with those grand puppies. It'd be great. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, no, that's awesome. And so, so right now, we're working together, like not only as like a client, but like I said earlier, like, you're now a coach, for my program, and for like our community. And so I have like a strong belief that, if you want to get somewhere like faster and with a lot less like stress and like struggle, like, mentorship is key. Like you can figure it out. You can go through all the trials and tribulations and failures, and that's fine. And like, some people do that. And some people, that's how I did it. Like, that's how I learned. But I spent 10 years learning how, and failing and doing stupid shit that I wish I wouldn't have done. Now looking back, that I was like, oh, that was a mistake. Like, oh my God, I wasted so much time doing it that way, or that kind of thing. And so, you can take that, as you will, and you can, spend all that time, or you can, get a mentor and make it happen faster, or get a coach, or whatever, however you want to look at it. But I think all the great coaches and great mentors, or great, people who are great at what they do, they all have some level of accountability, and some level of, coaching or mentorship. And so for you, going from, because you were in the client position, and you were also in kind of in the coach position prior to us working together before the pandemic, but, going from, because you've seen it from both sides, and I've also seen it from both sides. But for you, I was curious, what now, after being a client and now being a coach, what are some things that you think, what are some of the valuable things that you've learned from kind of playing both sides?
You didn't tell me this question.
I sent her a little outline before this podcast. I was I sent you this. And I was like, this is kind of what we're going to be talking about, and then I just threw this random curveball in there, and that's okay.
Random one, yeah.
So I guess another way I would word it is what are some of the benefits that you've recognized now being a coach that that you think are really valuable things for a client, or somebody, or not even a client for us, but just somebody in general who wants to succeed at their goals. I think one thing that comes to mind for me is just literally accountability and support. That's freaking enormous for a lot of people. And so for you,
you can't give if consistently if you don't have stuff giving back, and having a coach or a mentor helps put stuff back into your cup or your bucket or whatever, so that you've got the energy to give to other people too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you said that, because that wasn't even one of the things that I was even thinking about, because that's very true. I mean, it's one of those things that's almost like an exchange of energy in a sense. It's almost you're getting supported, you're getting cheered on, you're getting that extra set of eyes on what you got going on, to maybe help you work through your problem more effectively that you might be doing. Because at the end of the day, everybody's going to have struggles in their journey. That's just a fact of a fitness journey or a weight loss journey. No matter how perfect or consistent you are at whatever you do, you're going to have times where it's I'm struggling right now, or I'm some crazy shit happened in my life, and now I feel shit's hitting the fan, and and having somebody there to kind of be that kind of rock of support / accountability, I think is huge in a lot of ways. And one of the other things I was going to say too about accountability and support is just it's one of those things that a lot of times people fail to realize that you can know how to do something. A lot of this stuff, fitness and nutrition wise, I mean, people can look it up online how to do it. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. You got to be careful about that for sure. But even the people who are if you're listening to this podcast right now, it's you found this free episode, and it's got free information, it's got free perspectives and all this other stuff. It's all free. And so you can learn how to do these things, especially right now with the internet being a thing. It's more available to people now than ever, a lot of this information. But things are easier to learn than they are to actually implement in your life. And I think that support and that accountability is a huge factor there, because it can help. People don't need to learn new things. Oftentimes they just need to be reminded of what they already know. And so I think that that's something that I think is also really helpful when it comes to having a mentor or a teacher or a coach or whatever, however you want to look at it. But so for you, also, actually, this is a good moment to I just thought of this. Shout out you have a 14-day challenge coming up that you're running. We should let's talk about that for a sec. Let's throw that out there and throw some more randomness at you. So it's starting this Monday, officially?
Yep, on Monday officially.
Cool.
It's almost full.
Yeah, it is.
which is amazing.
Let's
I was
go.
not
Let's
expecting
go.
that.
Extra shoulders
Right?
on. Let's go. That's awesome. We like that. We're gonna help some people. What
We
all
are really fun
for the
people.
people that are listening? What all kind of is going into that, or how can they, potentially apply for that?
I have the application link on
Mhm.
my Facebook.
Okay.
I'm Erin Towsley.
You got an
I'm
Instagram too, right?
pretty sure I'm like the only one because Towsley is a made up name.
Yes, it is.
Um,
I always misspell it every time I'm like sending like an email or like looking up your thing on Facebook or whatever. I'm like, is there an E in there? Is there not an E? Like, and there, yeah. And I always mess it up the first time,
the
but yeah.
funny thing is, when I met my husband, his Facebook name was spelled wrong, and like
Oh,
it was
really?
his name, but
Yeah.
he had spelled his own name wrong,
Oh my gosh.
and so so I'm asking him like, wait, how do you spell your name?
Oh my gosh. That's so funny. But then they can find you
And
though
they can find me on Facebook,
okay.
and
And what's your Instagram
it'll be
handle
there.
too?
My Instagram is EwokT Fitness.
That's awesome. Every time I see that, I think of Star Wars, like the Ewoks.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying? And you're a big Star Wars fan
It's
too.
like walk as in like walker,
Yeah, yeah,
not
yeah.
not
That's true. That's funny. And but yeah. So if you're listening to this right now and you want to, and it's a free challenge, it's 14 days. It's gonna include like
nutrition
nutrition
and
workouts.
workouts,
There's gonna
fun
be
lives. I'm gonna
yeah,
do a couple weekly challenges that'll be
yeah.
fun to do.
I might pop in
Uh,
there too and say hi if that's cool.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. And then also like there's gonna be a support group too, so it'll be
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
it'll be a
pretty
good
cool.
support on Facebook private
Sweet.
group.
Hell yeah, let's go. That's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Cool. And then as far as you hitting like, I think it's always important to like set our sights on like, new goals as we hit milestones. And so for you, in terms of like your own goals, like, now that we've hit this big milestone of like literally losing 50 pounds, which is fucking amazing and crazy. Like that's a lot. That's like the whole, that's like
That's
two
huge.
toddlers or like a
Yeah,
really big toddler, like my toddler. Like that's like
yeah.
he's heavy. That's like 50, or that's one of him like off of your body. So that's like huge. And like you've been recomping your body like crazy. Like I was gonna say too, like, I mean, I've had so many people like I've had like a lot of people send me messages being like, oh my gosh, like Erin looks amazing. She is like crushing it right now. Like which is really cool. And so for you, what have you kind of like set your sights on goal wise as kind of like we continue? Because like I think that, like what's next for you, I guess, in terms of like your own personal goals.
I have like a picture in my mind of what I want my body to look like.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, everybody kind of has like a number on the scale they'd like to see.
Mhm.
I'm kind of getting to that point to where if I didn't see that number on the scale, I'd be okay because
Yeah.
of how I'm feeling,
Yeah.
and like my clothes fit
Yeah.
and they fit
Yeah.
how I like them to fit, not,
Yeah.
and
That's awesome.
so, but yeah, I'd like some more muscle definition
Yeah.
and stuff like that. It's more for me about how, not as much like the numbers as much as it's how I'm feeling,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Non-scale victories right there.
non-scale
Like
victories.
that's
Mhm.
because I mean, like a number on the scale, it's one factor among many, but like once you
It
get to a
is.
certain point, it's like there's like so many other things that you can like love and benefit from your own like fitness journey and like the workouts and feeling stronger and striving towards those sort of things. I think, and having that I was going to mention this, something that I want to touch on. Like you mentioned it, you have this like visualization almost like in your mind of like how you want to feel and what you want to look like and like what your life's is going to be like once you reach that point. And I think that that's something that's so important for people to have coming into their journey, is kind of like a sense of clarity around what they want. Because a lot of times people just come into their journey like, I want to lose 20 pounds because that's kind of sounds good, or that's what I was before like I gained this last 20 pounds or whatever. But I don't think that that's like a clear enough why or deep enough why for a lot of people. And so like for you, like you made a vision board, right? You made a vision board.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, you did. Okay,
hanging
cool.
up in my bathroom. I see it
Yeah.
every day.
That's awesome. And so for you, like how important would you say is, having like that vision board or having like that clarity in your own journey?
Oh, you need that.
Yeah.
That's like your compass.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
like, no matter what
I
happens
love that you
in
said that.
life,
It is.
you still got that, like, this is where I'm going. So,
Yeah. Mm.
like, I caught COVID, so
Yeah.
I had to take time off of
Mhm.
workouts. I
Mm.
still focused on my nutrition because that was one thing I could do.
Yeah.
Um,
That's so
and I
true.
was lucky I never lost my sense of taste or smell, so I
Yeah.
was still, able to enjoy food. But,
Mm.
um, I still had that vision board, and I'm like, "You know what? Um, I one of the things on my vision board was riding my bike across the state.
Yeah.
And even though I didn't ride it the entire time,
Mm.
I still rode 100 miles of it.
Mm.
And so I feel like I still like met that goal,
Yeah. Oh,
like,
yeah.
and it can be on my board for next year to
Yeah.
ride further,
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
more than 100 miles next year because, I won't have just caught COVID and gotten
Yeah.
over it and been set back from that. So,
Absolutely. That's so awesome. I love that you said that with it being like a compass, because it's very true. Because sometimes, like, no, we do have shit happen. We do get sick. We do, have something bad happen in our life that kind of can throw us off track. And if you don't have that like clarity, or you don't have that like vision board, because like for those of you that don't know, or aren't a part of our like community or whatever, and for our private clients, we do a vision board every year. We make a vision board for the new year to like kind of set the tone for like what we want to accomplish that year. And so, if somebody, went through what you went through, and, with COVID or whatever other thing could happen, and they didn't have that, that compass or that vision board, that visualization of what they want to achieve, it could be a lot harder to get back on track. It could be a lot harder to stay the course when, because when that stuff happens, you get hit with like negative thoughts, or, your mindset can get kind of thrown out of whack. And so I think that that's super cool and super important. And I think that, if you're listening right now and you don't have, a vision board, or you don't have clarity in your own goals, like, find that clarity, like work on it, like write it out, like visualize it, like what you want to actually like achieve for yourself. And you're going to have a much higher chance of actually achieving it if you do that. So yeah. Cool. I think other than that, I think any last little grains of wisdom, or like a golden nugget that you'd like to leave people with, that you think was, that helped you out the most, that you think would help somebody, new to a fitness journey, or that maybe in like a similar position that you were in before we started working together?
hmm, I think one of the biggest things was um, facing your fears and just being brave to
Yeah.
like, because I'm not gonna lie, I had a ton of self-doubt when I
Mm,
started, and I was afraid that I was going to hurt myself,
mm,
um, and set myself back
yeah.
essentially. Of course, I did the opposite, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I had to
Clearly.
be brave enough to ask for help and to
Yeah.
like trust you
Yeah.
that this these steps were going to lead me in the right direction.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's awesome. Yeah. And I think that's so funny that you say that, because I did a post yesterday about that, like that fear kills more dreams than failure ever will. Like it's so true. Like, I mean, like if you never try, or if you let like fear paralyze you from like making a decision for yourself to start your own journey, like you're never going to make it. If you continue to let that like control you and kind of dictate your path for yourself. And so like kind of like what you said with, visualizing being and having a vision board being kind of like a compass. I also think that using fear, or like something that scares you, or something that makes you uncomfortable, as a compass as well, to be like, that's the thing that I
yeah.
should do. That's the thing that I should, use as my like next, like, uh diving board moment, that I'm gonna like, jump into it and just kind of go for it. I think that, not letting that fear win, and actually using it to your advantage, as being like, that's the next thing I should do. I think that that's
Yeah,
something
using
that,
it to encourage
yeah,
personal growth
yeah,
versus letting it stunt you.
yeah. Ooh, so true. Yeah. Let it help you grow. Don't let it like stagnate you. I think it's kind
Yeah,
of like
yeah.
the end point on that. So cool. Erin, thank you for coming on this. Well, I think we're going to end it here. And just as like a little bit of a last minute like reminder to those that are listening, like where can they find you at?
On Facebook, I'm Erin Towsley,
Mm.
or Instagram, TikTok, Ewok T Fitness.
Let's freaking go. Let's go.
Yeah.
She has a couple spots left, so don't be afraid to reach out to her. Or if you can't find her for whatever reason, send me a message and I will send it to you as well. So that way you can snag one of those last spots. So cool. Other than that, Erin, thanks for coming on. Appreciate the hell out of
Thank
you.
you.
And I'm excited to see how things continue to go. And I'm excited to continue growing this awesome community, working together and making that happen. So yeah, let's freaking go.
Yeah.
Bye guys.